Yo, today I'm going over the 2024 United States Senate elections map, and I'm doing a quick mid-month sort of prediction of it based on the polls in every single state. So before I begin, I just want to mention that there were some states that did not have any polling data done for these races on the Real Clear Politics polling website. So what I did was I went in and assigned those states to their party because all the states that did not have any polling data, we know, like we're 99% sure we know how they're going to vote on election day. For instance, we know Connecticut will go Democrat. We know Utah will go Republican. So we assigned those states to their respective parties, but because we did not have any polling data. Every other state that's left in that light gray color does have polling data, so we're going to go over that now in this video, starting with the state of Washington. So in the state of Washington, this is a Democratic incumbent facing up against a Republican challenger. And as you can see, the most recent polls are plus 22, plus 9, and plus 20, the most recent being plus 22. That is absolutely a safe seat for the Democratic Party. Now we'll go to the state of California. California, I believe there's a retiring incumbent. We have Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff running up against Republican Steve Garvey. If you're interested more in this one, I've already done a breakdown of this race more in depth in a separate video on my channel. Schiff is leading in the polls 23.3% on average. This would put California into the safe Democratic column. Now we're going to come back to Montana, Nevada, and Arizona because these are three very important Senate races that I desperately want to talk about more. These are some of the closer ones in the country. The state of New Mexico, however, is not as competitive as these ones. In New Mexico, the Democratic incumbent Martin Heinrich is leading his Republican challenger by 10% of the vote. That would be more than enough to put New Mexico into the safe Democratic column. Democrats are up to 36, Republicans are at 44. Texas, we'll go to the state of Texas now. This is Senator Ted Cruz. He's running for re-election, and the polls so far have actually been very, very close. He's leading over his opponent, Democrat Colin Allred, by 4.8% in the RCP average. A very close race, borderline being in the likely column, but just barely. I'd put Texas into the lean Republican column based on what the polling data says. Now we'll go to a state like Missouri. The state of Missouri, this is Senator Josh Hawley running for re-election. He has some polls. The average is not put in, but plus 11, plus 9, plus 14, 13, 13. That will add up to over 10. That can put Missouri into the safe Republican column. Now we're going to look at the state of Tennessee. Right nearby, this is Marsha Blackburn's Senate seat. And she is leading in the average of polls by 17.5 percentage points. This would be putting Tennessee into the safe Republican column. Now the state of Florida, this is a very, very interesting one where Rick Scott is running for re-election. It is now moved into the toss-up column on the RCP website. Rick Scott holds a 4% lead right now over his Democratic challenger, McCarcel Powell. This is one that is actually getting very, very close and one I'm certainly keeping an eye out for on election night. I think right now the polls show Scott would win. In my own personal rankings, I have Scott winning as well. But if Harris and the Democrats have a surprisingly very good election night, then I don't think it's inconceivable to imagine this seat flipping blue. However, right now I think Scott is favored to win. And by winning by 4 points, that's under likely. That would put Florida into the lean Democratic column. Now in the state of Virginia. The state of Virginia, this is Senator Tim Kaine. He is running for re-election against Republican Hung Cao. Kaine right now is leading in the polls by 12% of the vote in the RCP average. That would be enough to put Virginia into the safe Democratic column. In the state of West Virginia, this was Joe Manchin's Senate seat. He is retiring from the Senate. He is not running again. Republican Governor Jim Justice is running to replace him. And in the most recent poll, he has a 34-point lead. Not much of a surprise here. West Virginia will be a safe Republican seat. Next, we're going to go to the state of Indiana. Indiana right over here. Indiana is a seat that's not going to be too competitive. Representative Jim Banks is running to replace the retiring incumbent Mike Braun. He's going to win this seat by a safe margin. Now we're going to look at the state of Minnesota, where Amy Klobuchar, the senator, is running for re-election, once 2020 presidential candidate. She leads in the polls by 11.7%. This is the biggest lead by a Democrat, both for the presidential race and for the Senate race. She has the biggest lead. Not much of a surprise here. Minnesota will be a safe Democratic seat. Now we're going to go to the state of Maryland, where for a very blue state like Maryland, we have a surprisingly close race going on, where the Democratic candidate, also Brooks, is facing off against former Republican Governor Larry Hogan. Once upon a time earlier on in the election, it looked like the race was getting very close, under 5% of the vote. A few polls have come out in the last few weeks now showing it's over a 10-point race for also Brooks over Hogan. The average is still 9.5%, so that means it would be a likely Democratic state, not a safe one, but it's certainly trending to becoming a safe Democratic seat. Now we're going to go right next door to Maryland, to the state of Delaware, home state, of course, of President Joe Biden, where the Democratic candidate has a 20-point lead over the Republican candidate. This is certainly going to be a safe Democratic seat. Now to the state of New Jersey, where the incumbent Senator Bob Menendez was resigned from his seat, and it is now a race between Democratic Congressman Andy Kim and Republican Curtis Bashaw. Right now, Kim, in the one poll that's done, has a 9-point lead. I think it's more likely than not New Jersey will be a safe seat, but based on the polls, we'll put New Jersey into likely Democrat, because I'm just going purely off the polls in this video, not doing any interpretation. Now in the state of New York, this is Kirsten Gillibrand. She is running for re-election in the state of New York. Currently in the polls right now, she has a 20-point lead in the RCP average over her Republican challenger. No surprise here, New York will be a safe Democratic seat. Democrats are at 42, Republicans are at 50. We go to the state of Maine, where incumbent Senator Angus King is running for re-election. Only one poll has been done mid-August by UNH that showed King up by 10 points. His Republican challenger had 33. Another Democrat running had 9. Independent had 3. This is going to be one of those in Maine where it's very likely than not the first ballot on the ranked choice voting will not solve it, and it'll have to keep going and going until it's probably just the Democrat and Republican left. And then once that happens, I fully expect King to win this race in a safe margin. But for now, we're going to give the state of Maine to King in a safe margin, only by the thinnest of margins, but I think that'll be probably over 10 to 12 points easily come election night. So right now, Republicans have 50 Senate seats, Democrats have 43. And you could count Texas and Florida in this as well, but these are the states we're really watching to see if Republicans can flip control of the U.S. Senate, or can Democrats narrowly hold on to control of the U.S. Senate. If the Democrats on election night are, for instance, able to flip a state like Florida or Texas, that drastically improves their chances of winning. However, both of these states do have the Republican incumbents leading right now. And Republicans are certainly looking relatively good to flip the Senate, but I'll be getting to that in a second. But these are the states in gray I'm really watching the most. And I'm going to start right now with the state of Pennsylvania. The state of Pennsylvania is absolutely very close on the presidential level. In the Senate race, right now, Democratic incumbent Bob Casey has a 3.9% lead over Republican Dave McCormick. And this is one that has actually been one of the closer races this cycle, despite the fact that you would think before the election even began that Casey would be a shoo-in to win this election, given his family's history in the state and his relatively high popular approval ratings. Those have gone down a little bit in the last few weeks and is leading to somewhat of a close race. That being said, Casey still has a 3.9% lead. At the same time, as of the day I'm recording this video, Donald Trump has pulled ahead of Kamala Harris in the RCP average for the presidential level for the state of Pennsylvania. So I think it's certainly possible McCormick could pull an upset in Pennsylvania, but I think right now Casey is still narrowly favored to hold on, and the 3.9% RCP polling average says that Casey would win this race in a lean Democratic margin. That's going to be one to watch in the final days of the election leading up to Election Day, because I think the polls are going to get very tight in Pennsylvania. Next, we're going to move to the state of Ohio, right next door, where Democratic incumbent Sherrod Brown is in a fight for his political life against Republican Bernie Moreno. This is one that's gotten very, very close. It is only a 2.6% lead for Brown over Moreno in the RCP average, and the trend has certainly been that the Browns' numbers are getting smaller and smaller leading up until Election Day. Unlike Pennsylvania, where if Trump wins the state of Pennsylvania, he's likely going to do it by under 1% of the vote. We pretty much know for a fact Donald Trump will win the state of Ohio by at least 7 to 8% of the vote. So for Brown to win, he has to outperform Trump by about somewhere between 7 to 10 percentage points. That's a lot harder to do than outperforming Harris by 1 percentage point. So this is going to be a very, very interesting one to watch. And the polls right now have Brown as the narrow favorite, 2.6% as a lean Democrat. My own personal rankings, I'm not so sure Brown's going to be able to hold on. I think it's a little bit of an uphill battle for him at this time. But the polling average says he's leading by a lean margin in Ohio, so that's why I will assign it in this video. But in my own personal rankings, I would say, hold on a second. I think Ohio is starting to trend more towards the Republican direction, but that's one to watch for very, very closely. Democrats have 45, Republicans have 50. Now we move to the state of Michigan, an open Senate seat where the Democratic incumbent is retired, and this one has gotten very, very close in the last few days. Democrat Lisa Slotkin has 47.5% of the vote. Republican Mike Rogers has 45.6%. It is now only a 1.9% lead in this Senate seat. And this comes on the heels as Michigan has skyrocketed its poll numbers for Donald Trump. Donald Trump is now leading in the RCP average in Michigan. And as that's happened, Mike Rogers' numbers have also gone up, where he was down by 4.7% a little over a week to a week and a half to 2 weeks ago. Now it's only a 1.9% race. The momentum certainly seems to be on the Republican side in Michigan. However, 1.9% lead for Slotkin at this time. Until the RCP average flips, we cannot assign this race to the Republicans because this video is just based on polls only. Michigan is very, very close, narrowly in the lean Democratic column, but definitely getting very, very close to watch. Now we're going to go to the state of Wisconsin, right next door to Michigan, where Democratic incumbent Tammy Baldwin has 49.4%, Republican Eric Hogg has 46%, a 3.4% lead for Baldwin over Hogg. This is one that's very, very interesting because throughout the summer, Baldwin had about a 6.7 point lead throughout most of the summer, and now leading into the fall, it's gone down to about 4. Now it's down to about 3.5. So far, Baldwin has had a very steady lead, and it looks like she's probably going to hold on to that lead, but we know Wisconsin is going to be very, very close on Election Day, and I think this race could be something similar to what Bob Casey is facing in Pennsylvania, where if the race is decided by under 1% of the vote on the presidential side, which I fully expect Wisconsin and Pennsylvania to be, then I think there's a good case that Baldwin may just have enough support to hold on and win the election due to her incumbency advantage. And the polls right now are super close, but 3.4% lead. That is enough to put Wisconsin into the lean Democratic column, but super, super close. Wisconsin definitely one to watch for as well. Now we're going to go to the state of Arizona. The state of Arizona, this is one where it was not super close according to the polls before in my last video. And right now, Democrat Ruben Gallego has a 49.8% lead to Kari Lake's 43%. Lake has pretty much remained consistently around that 43% range, not really going too much up from that, while Gallego's support has really gone up into the high 40s, almost low 50s. And this is just a race where I really don't see a way Kari Lake can win right now, with the polls being as lopsided as it is. A near 7-point lead for Gallego over Lake certainly suggests Gallego is favored to win this race, and at 6.8%, that would actually go into the likely Democratic column. Not even lean, likely. I think Arizona right now, the polls suggested, and I would agree, is more likely than not going to be a Democrat Senate victory. Next, we're going to go to the state of Nevada, where like Arizona, it's a very close race to the presidential level. When it comes to the Senate race, right now the Democratic incumbent Jackie Rosen has 50%, Republican Sam Brown has 42.5%. This is actually, believe it or not, better than what Brown was doing just a few weeks ago. He's still losing by 7.5 percentage points, but as you can see, as Rosen's numbers have ticked up a little bit as well, you can see Brown's numbers ticking up, but in a more substantial way than Rosen's is. Brown was at 39.6% on September 26th, and now on October 9th, Brown is up to 42.5%. So he's gone up about 3% in the last few weeks or so. The only problem is Rosen still has a commanding lead of about 7.5% over Brown. And having already reached the 50% threshold, I would certainly feel very confident Rosen's going to win this seat. And the polling average has her at plus 7.5. That would put Nevada into the likely Democratic column. And personally, in my own rankings, I would agree with that. Now we have one state left, the state of Montana. This is where Republicans are feeling the most optimistic about being able to flip the control of the Senate. And here's why. In the state of Montana, there's a Democratic incumbent, Jon Tester, running up against a Republican challenger, Tim Sheehy. Sheehy right now in the RCP average has 51.2% of the vote. Tester is 44.2%. Tester survived by only 3 percentage points in 2018, which was a overwhelmingly Democratic wave year, especially for the Senate elections. And Tester right now has about a 7-point lead over Sheehy, or Sheehy has a 7-point lead over Tester, which is about the same margin I just showed you as Jackie Rosen over Sam Brown and Ruben Gallego over Kari Lake. This race is looking less like one of the really close toss-ups like Michigan and Ohio, and is starting to look more like Nevada and Arizona, which is not something the Democrats would want to look for. Because if this race does, and the polls are 7 points for Sheehy, that would put Montana into the likely Republican column. That would give the Republicans control of the U.S. Senate by 1 seat, 51 to 49. Whereas if the Democrats were able to hold on to this seat, it would have been 50-50, and the winner of the presidential election would hold the Senate. But just purely based off the RCP polling average right now, Republicans have 51 Senate seats, Democrats have 49. And again, I mentioned we still have a few weeks until Election Day. I'm really closely watching Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Because as these polls get really, really tight in the last few days of the presidential race, I fully expect the Senate polls to get closer and closer as well, especially as more voters become more aware of these Republican challengers in Wisconsin, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, who maybe they're not as familiar with. I fully expect the polls to tighten and get closer to what Donald Trump's polls are. The question is, will it be enough? But that's for a later date's conversation. But right now, Republicans, based on the RCP average, would flip Senate control with 51 to Democrats 49. That will do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give it a like. And if you really liked it, please remember to click the subscribe button. And make sure you turn post notifications on so you always get notified when I post a new video. That way you never miss one. Also, please remember to share this video with your friends and family if you really, really, really like the video. And remember to stay tuned because I'll be posting at least one video every single day leading up until Election Day. So I'd really appreciate it if you keep coming back and watching those videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.